What happens when the galaxy's greatest powers mock a species they've never truly understood? What occurs when ancient civilizations, drunk on their own superiority, push too far against beings who've spent millennia perfecting the art of war? In the cold depths of space, where silence stretches between stars, some lessons are learned too late. Some laughter dies in the throat. And sometimes, the hunters discover they were always the hunted. They thought Earth was weak. They thought humanity was simple. They thought the council chambers were safe. They were catastrophically wrong. This is the story of humanity's response to mockery, a response that would echo across the galaxy for 1,000 years, whispered in the dark corners of space stations, trembling in the voices of those who survived to tell the tale. A response so swift, so complete, so terrifyingly elegant that it would redefine what it means to be apex predators in an infinite universe. Welcome to the day the galaxy learned why you never, ever laugh at Earth. The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Council headquarters stretched across the asteroid's surface like a jeweled crown, its transparent walls offering an unobstructed view of the star field beyond. Inside, representatives from 1,000 worlds sat in their designated pods, each one floating at precisely the right height and angle to display their species' natural authority. The air hummed with translation matrices, converting the dozens of languages into comprehensible meaning for every delegate present. Ambassador Sarah Chun sat in the human delegation pod, her modest gray uniform a stark contrast to the elaborate ceremonial garments worn by the other representatives. Her dark eyes remained focused on the central speaking platform where Chancellor Vex Tai of the hegemony stood, his reptilian features twisted into what humans had learned to recognize as disdain. The motion before this council, Vex Tai announced, his voice carrying across the chamber with practiced authority, concerns the human species' request for military coordination rights in the Outer Rim territories. Their proposal suggests that their so-called fleet could provide meaningful assistance in containing the recent pirate incursions. A ripple of what could only be described as amusement spread through the chamber. The Corvin delegation, massive insectoid beings with chitinous shells that gleamed like polished metal, clicked their mandibles in synchronized patterns that Chin's earpiece translated as laughter. The ethereal Nexari, beings of pure energy contained within crystalline matrices, pulsed with colors that her cultural briefings had identified as expressions of mockery. Chin's jaw tightened, but she maintained her composure. She had expected this reaction. Humanity had only joined the Galactic Council 18 months ago, after their first contact with the trade vessel Prosperity's Dawn. To most of these ancient civilizations, humans were barely more than primitives who had stumbled into space travel through luck rather than genuine advancement. Perhaps, continued Vex Tai, his forked tongue flicking out to taste the air, the human representative would care to enlighten this council about the impressive nature of their military capabilities? The Chancellor's tone made it clear that this was not a genuine request for information, but rather an invitation for public humiliation. Chen could see the anticipation in the assembled delegates' postures. They wanted a show, wanted to see the upstart humans put in their place. Chen rose slowly from her seat, activating the pod's communication system. Her image appeared on the central holographic display, magnified so that every delegate could see her clearly. She was smaller than most beings in the chamber, her species considered physically inferior by galactic standards. The Thraxians alone stood 12 feet tall and possessed enough natural armor to shrug off small arms fire. The Voidborn could manipulate gravity itself. The ancient architects could reshape matter with their thoughts. And here she stood, representing a species that had achieved faster-than-light travel barely 5 centuries ago. Honored Chancellor, Chen began, her voice steady and professional. I appreciate the Council's interest in humanity's contributions to galactic security. Our fleet may indeed seem modest by the standards of civilizations with millions of years of spacefaring experience. Another wave of barely contained amusement swept the chamber. Chen noticed that even the usually stoic Eternal Wardens, beings who had witnessed the birth and death of stars, seemed to be enjoying the spectacle. Modest, repeated Chancellor Vex Tai, his vertical pupils dilating with what Chen recognized as predatory satisfaction. An interesting choice of words. Perhaps the ambassador could provide specific numbers? How many ships does this fleet comprise? Chen's earpiece crackled with a private transmission from her aide, Lieutenant Commander Torres, who was monitoring the session from the human embassy ship in orbit. Ambassador, we're picking up increased chatter from the other delegation's security details. They're treating this like entertainment. Chun touched her earpiece once to acknowledge, then addressed the chamber. Our current active fleet consists of approximately 1,200 vessels of various classifications. The laughter that erupted was immediate and overwhelming. The Corvin delegation's clicking reached a crescendo that made Chen's ears ring even through the translation matrix's filters. The massive granite lords, sentient rock formations that communicated through seismic vibrations, caused several smaller asteroids in the vicinity to shake with their amusement. 1,200, Vextai repeated, his reptilian features contorted in an expression of barely restrained hilarity. The hegemony's patrol fleet alone numbers over 50,000 vessels. The Nexari Collective maintains a standing force of 86,000 ships, and humanity proposes to assist us with 1,200. The Thraxian Empire, boomed General Krex from his delegation pod. His four arms spread wide in a gesture of incredulous amazement, has battle cruisers larger than your entire fleet combined. We have scout ships that could eliminate your forces without assistance. Perhaps, suggested Counselor Zethmira of the Voidborn, her voice carrying across multiple dimensions simultaneously. The humans could serve as messengers? Their ships might be suitable for carrying communications between real military forces. The chamber erupted in renewed laughter. Chun watched as delegates from species she had hoped to build alliances with joined in the mockery. The Starweavers, whose technology bordered on magic, projected illusions of tiny human ships being swatted aside by massive alien dreadnoughts. The Crimson Dynasty's representatives applauded with their 6 hands, their appreciation for the humiliation genuine and enthusiastic. Chun felt her hands clench into fists at her sides. These beings had no idea what they were dealing with. Humanity's introduction to the galactic community had been carefully orchestrated to appear harmless, non-threatening. The Council had seen their civilian ships, their research vessels, their tradecraft. They had observed human colonies that appeared vulnerable and poorly defended. They had witnessed humanity's seemingly crude technology and assumed it represented the peak of human achievement. They had no concept of what lay hidden in the deep spaces between stars, in the asteroid belts and nebulae where humanity's true strength waited in absolute silence. I understand the Council's perspective, Chen said, her voice cutting through the laughter with surprising sharpness. The mockery gradually died down as delegates realized she was still speaking. 1,200 ships does seem like a small contribution when compared to the vast fleets of the established powers. Indeed, Vextai nodded, clearly pleased with her apparent acceptance of humanity's inferior position. Perhaps humans would be better served focusing on their trade capabilities. We understand your species has certain talents in commerce and resource extraction. More chuckles rippled through the chamber. The hegemony had been pressuring human colonies to provide raw materials at below-market rates, taking advantage of humanity's perceived weakness and isolation. Chun touched her earpiece again, sending a coded signal to Commander Torres. However, she continued, I feel I should clarify something about those 1,200 ships. And what clarification might that be? Asked Chancellor Vextai, his tone suggesting he was prepared to endure whatever face-saving explanation the human might offer. Those 1,200 ships represent our active patrol and exploration fleet, Chen said. They are the vessels currently assigned to peaceful operations, scientific research, and trade route protection. A few delegates shifted in their pods, sensing something in her tone that suggested more was coming. Our actual military fleet, Chun continued, her voice growing colder, operates under different classification protocols. The laughter began to fade as delegates picked up on the subtle change in her demeanor. The human ambassador no longer looked embarrassed or defensive. Her posture had straightened, her eyes had hardened, and something in her voice suggested that the conversation was about to take an unexpected turn. Different protocols? Vextai asked, his amusement beginning to be replaced by wariness. Chen smiled, but it was not the expression of someone trying to save face. It was the smile of someone who had been playing a game by entirely different rules than her opponents realized. Yes, Chancellor. You see, those 1,200 ships you found so amusing are what we classify as our diplomatic fleet. They're specifically designed to appear non-threatening to potential allies and trading partners. We've found that displaying our actual military capabilities during first contact situations tends to complicate negotiations. A profound silence settled over the chamber. Several delegates leaned forward in their pods, suddenly, paying much closer attention to the small human woman who stood before them. When you speak of your actual military capabilities, asked Counselor Zethmira, her multidimensional voice carrying a note of genuine curiosity, what numbers are we discussing? Chen's smile widened slightly. That information is classified, Counselor. However, I can tell you that our defense coordination protocol recognizes several thousand star systems as being under direct human protection. Each of those systems maintains what we consider adequate defensive capabilities. Adequate by whose standards? Demanded General Krex, his massive frame bristling with sudden alertness. By ours, Chen replied simply. The chamber had grown so quiet that the background hum of the translation matrices seemed almost deafening. Delegates who had been laughing moments before now stared at the human ambassador with growing unease. Chancellor Vextai cleared his throat, his reptilian features no longer displaying any trace of amusement. Ambassador Chen, are you suggesting that humanity has been misrepresenting its military strength during the application process for council membership? Not misrepresenting, Chancellor. Simply following our standard first contact protocols. We've found that revealing our full capabilities too early in diplomatic relationships can lead to unfortunate misunderstandings. What kind of misunderstandings? Asked the Nexary representative, her crystalline form pulsing with colors that Chen's briefings indicated meant deep concern. Chen's expression remained neutral, but her words carried weight that seemed to settle over the chamber like a dense fog. The kind where potential allies feel threatened rather than reassured. The kind where trade negotiations become military standoffs. The kind where species make decisions based on fear rather than mutual benefit. She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. Humanity learned long ago that sometimes the best way to make friends is to let them think they're stronger than you are, at least until friendship is firmly established. The implications of her statement hit the assembled delegates like a wave. If humans had been deliberately concealing their true military strength, what did that say about their technology, their intentions, their long-term plans? And now, asked Vextai, his voice carefully controlled, are you revealing this information as a threat? Chen shook her head. Not a threat, Chancellor. A clarification. The Council has been debating whether humanity can contribute meaningfully to galactic security. I simply wanted to ensure that any decisions are made with complete information. She activated her pod's holographic display, showing what appeared to be a standard star chart of human space. To most of the delegates, it looked like a modest collection of systems connected by established trade routes. This is human space as most of you understand it, Chen explained. 47 star systems with established colonies, connected by conventional faster-than-light travel routes. Population approximately 15 billion across all worlds. The display shifted, revealing a dramatically different image. The modest cluster of systems suddenly expanded into a vast network spanning hundreds of light years, with thousands of connections between systems that had appeared empty moments before. This is human space as it actually exists. 237 star systems under direct human administration, with established populations on over 800 worlds. Total human population currently stands at approximately 400 billion. The silence in the chamber was absolute. Several delegates had stopped breathing entirely, their alien physiologies locked in shock at the revelation. The difference, Chun continued calmly, represents what we call our deep space infrastructure. Hidden colonies, concealed military installations, cloaked research facilities, and what our military classifies as strategic reserve assets. General Krex's forearms trembled as he struggled to process the implications. You're claiming that humanity has hidden the existence of thousands of worlds. Not hidden, General. Simply not advertised. Stealth technology has always been one of humanity's particular strengths. We found it useful for maintaining strategic flexibility. The Star Weaver's representative, an ancient being whose species was known for their ability to perceive hidden truths, spoke for the first time during the session. The veils, we sensed veils in human space, but assumed they were natural phenomena. Technology, Chen confirmed. We call it Shroud Protocol. Every human system is equipped with reality distortion generators that make our worlds appear uninhabited to most forms of detection. What you've seen of human space represents only what we chose to reveal. Chancellor Vextai had gone completely still, his reptilian brain struggling to recalculate everything he thought he knew about the galactic balance of power. And your fleet. Chen's smile became absolutely predatory. Our diplomatic fleet consists of 1,200 ships, as I mentioned. Our home defense fleet numbers approximately 40,000 vessels. Our strategic reserve fleet. She paused, seeming to consider her words carefully, is classified. However, I can tell you that it significantly exceeds both of those numbers combined. The chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates shouted questions and demands for clarification while their security details scrambled to reassess threat levels. Several species representatives began frantically communicating with their home governments, sending emergency transmissions across the galaxy. Through it all, Ambassador Sarah Chen stood calmly in her pod, watching as the galactic order shifted around her words. The laughter that had filled the chamber moments before had been replaced by the cold mathematics of fear and respect. For the first time since humanity had joined the Galactic Council, no one was laughing at Earth. The emergency session convened 6 hours after Ambassador Chen's revelation, with the council chambers now bearing little resemblance to the casual gathering where humanity had been mocked. Gone were the relaxed postures and amused expressions. Security details from a dozen species patrolled the corridors outside, their weapons systems active for the first time in decades. The very air seemed to vibrate with tension as delegates filed into their pods with the grim efficiency of being suddenly aware they might be in immediate danger. Chancellor Vextai entered the chamber flanked by 2 hegemony war guards, their massive energy weapons conspicuously displayed. His reptilian features were set in hard lines, the earlier smugness replaced by calculating wariness. As he took his position at the central podium, his eyes never left the human delegation pod where Ambassador Chen sat with the same calm demeanor she had maintained throughout the crisis. This emergency session is called to order, Vextai announced, his voice carrying none of its previous condescension. The purpose of this gathering is to address the significant intelligence failure that has apparently compromised our understanding of human capabilities and intentions. General Krex spoke first, his 4 massive arms gesturing aggressively as his words boomed across the chamber. The Thraxian Empire demands immediate clarification on the scope of human military assets. If this species has been operating under false diplomatic pretenses, it represents a threat to galactic stability that cannot be ignored. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembled delegates. The Corvin Collective's representative, Ambassador Hrixtel, leaned forward in his pod, mandibles clicking in patterns that Chen's earpiece translated as aggressive inquiry. Our intelligence services have been monitoring human space for over a year. How is it possible that we detected no evidence of these supposed hidden fleets? Chen activated her pod's communication system, her image appearing once again on the central display. This time, however, the delegates watched her with the intense focus of beings who had realized they were no longer dealing with a harmless newcomer. General Krex, Ambassador Hrixtel, I understand your concerns. Chen began, her tone professional but no longer deferential. However, I think there may be some confusion about the nature of humanity's position in this council. Confusion? Vextai's vertical pupils dilated dangerously. You have deliberately concealed military assets from this council while pursuing membership. That constitutes fraud at minimum, and potentially an act of espionage. Chen shook her head slowly. Chancellor, with respect, I believe you may be operating under a misunderstanding about the relationship between council membership and military disclosure. Could you point me to the specific treaty language that requires new members to reveal all strategic assets during the application process? A profound silence settled over the chamber as delegates realized the implications of her question. Counselor Zethmira of the Voidborn was the first to understand, her multidimensional voice carrying a note of grudging admiration. There is no such requirement. Military disclosure is voluntary and limited to assets specifically committed to Council operations. Exactly, Chen confirmed. Humanity has fully complied with all membership requirements. We disclosed our diplomatic fleet because those are the assets we were prepared to commit to joint operations. Our strategic capabilities were never part of the membership application because they were never intended to be shared with the Council. The ancient architect representative, a being whose crystalline form had remained motionless for the entire previous session, suddenly activated its communication matrix. When it spoke, reality itself seemed to bend around its words. The humans, they never applied for membership as a client species seeking protection. They applied as an independent power seeking diplomatic relations. The revelation hit the chamber like a physical blow. For decades, species had joined the Galactic Council as junior partners, offering their unique resources or capabilities in exchange for the protection and technological advancement that came with membership. The Council had assumed humanity was following the same pattern, presenting themselves as a useful but ultimately subordinate addition to the galactic community. They had never considered that humanity might view the relationship as one between equals. General Krex's massive frame shook with barely controlled rage. You manipulated us. You presented yourselves as primitives seeking guidance while concealing the fact that you possess strategic military capabilities. We presented ourselves exactly as we are, Chen replied calmly. A young spacefaring species interested in peaceful trade and cultural exchange. The fact that the Council chose to interpret our peaceful intentions as evidence of weakness says more about your assumptions than our actions. The Nexari representative pulsed with colors indicating deep analysis. Your technology, the stealth capabilities you mentioned, they exceed anything in our databases. How is this possible for a species that achieved faster-than-light travel only 5 centuries ago? Chen smiled, but there was something cold in the expression that made several delegates shift uncomfortably in their pods. Counselor Lyxera raises an interesting point about technological development timelines. Humanity did indeed achieve practical FTL travel 5 centuries ago. However, we had been developing other technologies for considerably longer. She activated her pod's holographic display again, this time showing what appeared to be a timeline of human technological advancement. Most delegates leaned forward to study the data, trying to understand how a species could develop advanced stealth systems before mastering interstellar travel. Humanity's technological development followed a somewhat unique path, Chen explained. While most species discover FTL travel and then expand outward, humans spent millennia perfecting the art of remaining undetected by hostile forces. Stealth technology, camouflage, misdirection, concealment. These became fundamental aspects of human science long before we reached the stars. Why? Asked the Starweaver representative, its ancient voice carrying genuine curiosity. What drove this development path? Chen's expression darkened slightly. Survival. For most of our recorded history, humanity existed in a state of constant warfare, not just between nations or tribes, but between ideologies, religions, economic systems, and social structures. We learned very early that the ability to hide, to misdirect, to appear weak while building strength was often the difference between survival and extinction. The chamber had grown deathly quiet as delegates began to understand the implications. Most spacefaring species had achieved peace within their own worlds before reaching the stars. They had developed FTL travel as a natural extension of their civilization's growth, expanding outward from stable, unified home planets. Humanity had apparently achieved interstellar capability while still locked in planetary conflicts, carrying their warlike nature and tactical sophistication into space with them. Ambassador Hrixtel's mandibles clicked nervously. Your homeworld, is it still experiencing active conflicts? Earth has been at peace for over 2 centuries, Chen replied. However, the lessons we learned during our more violent periods were never forgotten. We maintain what we call perpetual readiness protocols, the assumption that conflict is always possible, and that preparation is the price of peace. Chancellor Vextai had been conducting a hushed conversation with his advisors via private channel. When he addressed the chamber again, his voice carried a note of barely controlled hostility. Ambassador Chun, regardless of the legal technicalities involved, the hegemony considers humanity's concealment of strategic capabilities to be a hostile act. We demand immediate disclosure of all human military assets and their current locations. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. Chin's pleasant diplomatic expression slowly faded, replaced by something far more dangerous. When she spoke again, her voice carried an edge that made several delegates instinctively activate their personal defense systems. Chancellor, I'm afraid that's not going to happen. You refuse. Vextai's reptilian features twisted into a snarl. The hegemony has 17 battle fleets positioned throughout this sector. The Thraxian Empire maintains 40,000 vessels within range of human space. The combined military might of this council could reduce your hidden colonies to ash within days. You would refuse our demand. Chun stood slowly, her small frame somehow seeming to fill the entire chamber with menace. Chancellor, let me be very clear about something. Humanity joined this council seeking friendship, trade opportunities, and cultural exchange. We came here in good faith, following all required protocols, seeking to be good neighbors in a vast galaxy. She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. However, we did not come here seeking protection. We did not come here as supplicants begging for the council's mercy or guidance. We came here as an independent power willing to engage in mutually beneficial relationships with other independent powers. And if those relationships prove incompatible, asked General Krex, his forearms tensing as if preparing for combat. Chin's smile returned, but now it was the expression of a predator that had decided to stop hiding its teeth. Then, humanity would be forced to reconsider our approach to galactic diplomacy. The ancient architect's crystalline form suddenly blazed with brilliant light, its thoughts projecting directly into the minds of everyone present. The message was simple but terrifying. Asterisk, the human speaks truth. They are prepared for war. Asterisk, panic began to spread through the chamber as delegates realized the full scope of their miscalculation. They had assumed humanity was bluffing, using clever words to disguise essential weakness. The architect's confirmation meant that every word Chun had spoken was accurate. Humanity possessed strategic military capabilities that matched or exceeded their revealed numbers. Counselor Zethmira's multidimensional voice carried across several planes of existence simultaneously. Ambassador Chun, what exactly would this reconsideration involve? Chun tilted her head slightly, as if considering the question. That would depend entirely on the nature of any hostile actions taken against human interests. Humanity has extensive experience with defensive operations, but we're also quite capable of more proactive responses. You threaten the entire Galactic Council. Vextai's voice had risen to nearly a shriek. I threaten no one, Chancellor. I'm simply clarifying humanity's position should this council choose to interpret our desire for peaceful relations as evidence of vulnerability. We hope to avoid this conversation entirely, but recent events have made it necessary. General Krex slammed one massive fist against his pod's control surface. Enough. I call for an immediate vote of no confidence in human council membership. This species has proven itself fundamentally incompatible with galactic civilization. Several delegates began voicing support for the general's motion, but their enthusiasm seemed forced, driven more by fear than genuine conviction. They had spent the morning laughing at humanity's apparent weakness. Now they faced the possibility that their mockery had been directed at a species capable of galactic-level warfare. Chun watched the chaos unfold with apparent calm, but her earpiece crackled with an urgent transmission from Commander Torres. Ambassador, we're detecting massive fleet movements throughout the sector. Multiple species are mobilizing their forces. Chun touched her earpiece once to acknowledge, then addressed the chamber again. Honored delegates, I understand that today's revelations have been unsettling. However, I urge you to remember that humanity's goal remains unchanged. We seek peaceful coexistence and mutually beneficial relationships with all species. Your goals are irrelevant, snarled Vextai. Your deceptions have proven that humanity cannot be trusted. The hegemony formally withdraws recognition of human council membership and declares all human space to be under immediate military surveillance. A cascade of similar declarations followed as species after species announced their intention to monitor or restrict human activities. The careful diplomatic relationships that had taken months to build crumbled in minutes, replaced by the harsh realities of military posturing and territorial disputes. Chun listened to each declaration without comment, her expression growing progressively colder. When the chamber finally fell silent, she activated her communication system one final time. "I want to thank the Council for clarifying your positions so explicitly," she said, her voice carrying across the chamber with deadly precision. "It's always helpful when potential adversaries identify themselves clearly." The word adversaries hit the assembled delegates like a physical blow. In a single moment, Chun had redefined humanity's relationship with the galactic community from peaceful newcomers to a potential enemy with unknown capabilities. "Before I leave," Chun continued, "I want to share one final piece of information that might influence your future decisions." She activated her pod's display one last time, showing what appeared to be a real-time tactical readout of local space. Delegates watched in growing horror as hundreds of new contacts appeared on the display. Contacts that had been invisible moments before but were now revealing themselves throughout the sector. "Our strategic reserve fleet has been monitoring these proceedings with considerable interest," Chin explained calmly. They wanted to ensure that any decisions made today were based on complete information. The implications were staggering. While the Council had been debating humanity's capabilities, human warships had been positioned throughout local space, invisible and undetected, watching and listening to every word. They had been surrounded the entire time. Chancellor Vextai stared at the display in growing horror. How long have they been there?" Chin's smile was absolutely predatory. "Since approximately 30 minutes after the first council session where humanity was mentioned as a potential member. We like to be thorough in our security assessments." The chamber erupted into chaos as delegates realized they had been under surveillance for over a year. Every secret communication, every private strategy session, every confidential military briefing had potentially been monitored by a species they had dismissed as harmless primitives. Through the chaos, Ambassador Chin gathered her materials and prepared to leave. As she reached the pod's exit, she turned back to address the chamber one final time. "The human embassy ship will be departing within the hour. We consider diplomatic relations with the Council to be permanently severed. From this point forward, any vessel entering human space without explicit invitation will be considered hostile." She paused at the threshold, her final words carrying a weight that would haunt the galactic community for generations to come. "It's unfortunate that our introduction to galactic civilization had to end this way. But I want you all to remember something as you plan your next moves. You had the opportunity to be our friends. You chose to be our enemies instead." The chamber fell into absolute silence as the human ambassador departed, leaving behind a gathering of the galaxy's most powerful beings who had just realized they might have made the worst mistake in their species' histories. Outside the crystal dome, the stars continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the fact that the balance of galactic power had just shifted in ways that no one fully understood. The war that would reshape the galaxy had already begun. They just didn't know it yet. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the HSS Retribution, her weathered hands clasped behind her back as she studied the holographic display showing the hegemony's 7th Fleet. 43 vessels strong, the enemy formation moved through the outer reaches of the Kepler 442 system with the confidence of predators that had never encountered anything capable of fighting back. They had no idea they were already dead. "Time to intercept?" Vasquez asked without turning from the display. 16 minutes at current approach vectors, Admiral, replied Commander Singh from the tactical station. "The hegemony fleet is maintaining standard patrol formation. No indication they've detected our presence." Vasquez nodded grimly. 3 days had passed since Ambassador Chin's departure from the council chambers, and the galaxy's response had been swift and predictable. The major powers had mobilized their fleets, positioning them around human space like a noose preparing to tighten. They spoke of monitoring and containment, but their weapons were armed and their intentions clear. Humanity's reply would be equally clear. "Signal the task force," Vasquez ordered. Operation Scythe is authorized. All units are to maintain stealth protocols until weapons release. I want clean kills on every target. The acknowledgements came back immediately from the 37 vessels of Battle Group Omega, each ship's advanced cloaking systems rendering them effectively invisible to the hegemony's sensors. The technology that had kept humanity's true capabilities hidden for so long would now serve as the ultimate force multiplier in what was about to become the shortest naval engagement in galactic history. Vasquez had spent 40 years in the Human Defense Force, rising through the ranks during humanity's expansion into deep space. She had commanded vessels in the asteroid wars, the Titan Rebellion, and the brutal conflicts of the outer colonies. But this would be different. This would be the first time human forces had engaged an alien enemy in open warfare. The irony was not lost on her that the aliens had forced this confrontation by underestimating the very species they now sought to intimidate. Admiral, called Lieutenant Park from the communications station, were receiving updated intelligence from Surveillance Command. The Thraxian battle group in the Ross 128 system has begun moving toward the Mars corridor. ETA to human space is approximately 72 hours. Acknowledged, Vasquez replied. Admiral Morrison's people will handle the Thraxians. Our job is to send a message that the rest of the galaxy won't be able to ignore. She turned from the display to address her bridge crew directly. Listen carefully, all of you. What we do in the next 20 minutes will determine whether humanity's children grow up as free beings or as slaves to alien masters. The enemy fleet ahead of us represents everything wrong with this galaxy: arrogance, brutality, and the assumption that might makes right. The bridge crew listened with rapt attention. These men and women had trained their entire careers for this moment, preparing for the day when humanity would have to stand against forces that sought to subjugate them. But they made one critical mistake, Vasquez continued, her voice growing colder. They assumed that because we're young, we're weak. They assumed that because we sought peace, we're incapable of war. They forgot that humans have been perfecting the art of killing each other for 10,000 years, and we've gotten very, very good at it. A chorus of grim chuckles echoed through the bridge. The crew of the Retribution represented the best of humanity's military tradition, men and women who understood that sometimes peace could only be preserved through the skillful application of overwhelming violence. Signal from Admiral Chun, reported Lieutenant Park. All task forces are in position and ready for coordinated strikes. The enemy fleets have been isolated and identified. No civilian vessels detected in any target zones. Vasquez nodded. Ambassador Chen's sister had been placed in command of Operation Scythe's overall coordination, ensuring that humanity's first strike would be precisely targeted and absolutely devastating. 7 alien fleets had positioned themselves around human space, confident in their superiority. Within the hour, none of them would exist. Admiral, Commander Singh called from Tactical. The Hegemony fleet has reached the asteroid belt. They're beginning standard search patterns, looking for hidden installations. Vasquez smiled coldly. The Hegemony had correctly identified the Kepler 442 system as strategically important to human defense, but they had no understanding of what they were actually searching for. The asteroid belt did indeed contain hidden installations, massive automated defense platforms that could reduce entire fleets to scrap metal. But those platforms would remain silent for now. Humanity wanted the galaxy to understand that their victory came not from superior technology alone, but from superior tactics, training, and sheer bloody-minded determination. Range to target? Vasquez asked. 80,000 kilometers, and closing, Singh replied. All weapon systems are armed and ready. Target acquisition is complete. The bridge of the Retribution fell silent except for the gentle hum of life support systems and the barely audible whisper of the ship's quantum engines. Vasquez could feel the tension in the air, the anticipation of warriors who had trained for this moment their entire careers. On my mark, she said quietly, her words carrying across the bridge with absolute authority. Fire. The universe exploded into violence. 38 human warships dropped their cloaking systems simultaneously, revealing themselves at point-blank range to an enemy that had no idea they were under attack until the first missiles began impacting their hulls. The technological sophistication of human weapons became immediately apparent as antimatter warheads punched through alien shields like they were made of paper, while directed energy weapons carved through armor that had been considered impregnable by galactic standards. The hegemony fleet never had a chance to respond. Admiral Kasvar, commanding the 7th Fleet from the bridge of his flagship Dominion, watched in horror as his vessels died around him. The massive dreadnought Inevitable was the first to fall, its quantum shields failing under a barrage of weapons fire that seemed to ignore every defensive system known to hegemony science. The heavy cruiser's supremacy followed seconds later, its fusion core breached by a missile that had somehow passed through 6 layers of point defense without being intercepted. Return fire. Kasvar screamed, his reptilian features twisted in disbelief and rage. All ships, return fire. But there was nothing to fire at. The human vessels had struck from stealth and immediately cloaked again, becoming invisible ghosts that continued to pour devastating fire into the alien formation. Hegemony sensors, designed to detect ships operating with conventional technology, were useless against stealth systems that bent reality itself to hide their users. The slaughter continued for exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. When it ended, 43 hegemony vessels had been reduced to expanding clouds of debris and radiation. No human ship had suffered so much as a hull breach. On the bridge of the Retribution, Admiral Vasquez watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. Signal all units. Maintain stealth protocols, and proceed to Phase 2 coordinates. I want debris analysis completed and transmitted to Fleet Command within the hour. She turned to Commander Singh. Casualties? None reported, Admiral. The enemy never managed to return effective fire. Vasquez nodded. She had expected this outcome. The technological gap between human and alien military capabilities was even wider than their intelligence estimates had suggested. But the ease of the victory troubled her. Wars were rarely won by superior technology alone. The real test would come when the enemy adapted, when they began to understand what they were truly facing. Admiral, Lieutenant Park called from communications. We're receiving priority transmissions from the other task forces. All primary targets have been eliminated. Admiral Morrison reports complete success against the Thraxian battle group. Admiral Chun confirms destruction of the Nexari Collective's monitoring fleet. No human casualties reported in any engagement. The reports continued as Vasquez listened with growing amazement. 7 alien fleets, representing the military might of species that had dominated the galaxy for millennia, had been destroyed in less than an hour. The combined firepower that had been positioned to intimidate humanity into submission had been swept aside as if it had never existed. Signal Fleet Command, Vasquez ordered. Inform Admiral Reyes that Operation Scythe is complete. All primary objectives achieved. We are proceeding to Phase 2 on schedule. As the transmission was sent, Vasquez turned her attention to the broader tactical situation. Phase 1 had been the easy part, a straightforward application of superior technology and tactics against an unprepared enemy. Phase 2 would be considerably more complex, requiring humanity to demonstrate not just their ability to destroy alien fleets, but their capacity to reshape the galactic balance of power. Commander Singh, what's the status of our intelligence network? Singh consulted his displays. All surveillance assets remain operational, Admiral. We're maintaining real-time monitoring of 57 major alien installations and 32 government centers. No indication that the enemy has detected our observation platforms. Vasquez smiled grimly. While the galaxy's attention had been focused on the military standoff around human space, humanity's true intelligence apparatus had been silently mapping every aspect of alien civilization. Trade routes, military installations, government centers, industrial complexes, all of it cataloged, analyzed, and prepared for targeting if necessary. The aliens still had no idea what they were dealing with. Admiral, called Lieutenant Park, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Galactic Council. Chancellor Vextai is demanding immediate communication with human authorities regarding the destruction of council member fleets. Vasquez chuckled darkly. I imagine he is. Patch it through to Admiral Reyes. Let command handle the diplomatic response. Our job is to prepare for Phase 3. She turned back to the tactical display, which now showed the positions of the remaining alien fleets throughout the sector. Most were beginning to consolidate, pulling back from forward positions as their commanders struggled to understand what had just happened to their colleagues. They were displaying the classic symptoms of an enemy that had suffered a strategic surprise: confusion, overcaution, and the gradual recognition that their previous assumptions might have been catastrophically wrong. "Signal the task force," Vasquez ordered. "Begin redeployment to Phase 2 coordinates. I want all units in position for the next phase within 6 hours." As the human ships began their stealthy movement toward new positions, Vasquez reflected on the events of the past hour. Humanity had just announced its presence on the galactic stage in the most emphatic way possible. 7 fleets destroyed without warning, without mercy, and without the enemy ever truly understanding what had killed them. But this was only the beginning. The aliens would adapt, would begin to comprehend the true scope of human capabilities, would eventually mount a coordinated response that might actually pose a threat to human interests. When that happened, humanity would be ready. "Commander Singh," Vasquez said quietly, "begin preparation of the Phase 3 target packages. If the aliens want to escalate this conflict, we'll show them what human warfare really looks like." Singh's fingers moved across his console, accessing files that had been prepared years in advance for this exact scenario. Target packages uploaded: Admiral. 47 military installations, 23 government centers, and 12 major industrial complexes. All targets confirmed as legitimate military objectives. Vasquez nodded. Phase 3 would cross a line that the galaxy had never seen crossed before: direct attacks on alien homeworlds and core systems. It would be a demonstration of humanity's ability to project force across vast distances, to strike at the heart of enemy civilization with precision and devastating effect. It would also ensure that no alien species would ever again make the mistake of underestimating humanity. "Very good, Commander. Signal all units. We proceed as planned." In the depths of space, invisible to all forms of detection, the ships of Battle Group Omega began their approach toward targets that would reshape the galaxy forever. Behind them, the debris of 7 alien fleets continued to expand into the cosmic void, serving as monuments to the dangers of mocking a species that had spent 10,000 years learning how to wage war. The galaxy was about to discover why laughing at Earth had been the worst mistake in its history. The real war was just beginning. The emergency meeting of the Inner Circle convened in the deepest levels of the Council headquarters, 3 kilometers beneath the asteroid's surface, in a chamber designed to withstand direct assault by planetary-scale weapons. The 12 most powerful beings in the galaxy sat around a circular table made from crystallized spacetime itself, their forms illuminated by the harsh light of emergency protocols that had not been activated in over 1,000 years. Supreme Chancellor Vextai of the Hegemony looked older than his 400 years, his reptilian features marked by stress lines that had appeared in the 6 hours since the human strikes had eliminated 7 entire fleets. Across from him sat Marshal Eternal Karath of the Thraxian Empire, the massive warrior's 4 arms twitching with barely controlled rage as he reviewed the tactical reports that made no sense according to everything they understood about warfare. 43 ships, Vextai said, his voice hollow with disbelief. The 7th Fleet destroyed in under 5 minutes. No survivors. No distress calls. No indication of what weapons were used or where the attack came from. High Counselor Zethmira of the Voidborn floated above her designated position, her energy form flickering with colors that indicated deep analytical processing. "Our temporal scanners show the same pattern across all 7 engagement zones. The human vessels appeared from nowhere, fired weapons that our sensors cannot classify, and vanished again before our forces could respond." Ancient Prime Thexandra of the Architects suddenly blazed with brilliant light, her crystalline form projecting thoughts directly into the minds of everyone present. The message was simple but terrifying. The humans are not using technology we understand. They are operating by entirely different physical principles. General Supreme Korthval of the Granite Lords, a living mountain of sentient stone, generated seismic vibrations that translated as deep concern. The question becomes whether this is advanced science or something else entirely. Our preliminary analysis suggests their weapons ignore fundamental laws of physics as we understand them. Marshal Karath slammed one massive fist against the table, the impact sending shockwaves through the crystallized space-time surface. I don't care if they're using magic. They destroyed the 7th Assault Legion without even giving our warriors a chance to die with honor. That cannot be allowed to stand. Your desire for revenge is understandable, replied Lord Admiral Sithara of the Nexary Collective, her voice carrying across multiple dimensional frequencies. But we must consider the tactical implications. If the humans can eliminate entire fleets without detection, what prevents them from destroying our homeworlds? The question hung in the air like a death sentence. For all their vast experience with interstellar conflict, none of the assembled beings had ever faced an enemy capable of projecting such overwhelming force, while remaining completely invisible to all forms of detection. Supreme Chancellor Vextai activated the chamber's holographic display, showing the current positions of all remaining Council fleets throughout the galaxy. We have pulled back to defensive positions around our core systems. Combined, our forces still number over 300,000 vessels. Surely even the humans cannot match such overwhelming numbers. Can't they? Asked the ethereal Lyxandra of the Star Weavers, her ancient voice carrying the weight of eons. We assumed they possessed 1,200 ships, and discovered they had hidden thousands. We assumed they were technologically inferior, and learned their weapons make ours obsolete. What other assumptions have we made that might prove equally false? The assembled leaders fell silent as the implications sank in. Every piece of intelligence they had gathered about humanity had proven to be either incomplete or deliberately misleading. Their enemy had demonstrated capabilities that bordered on the supernatural, suggesting that humanity's true strength might be far beyond anything they had imagined. We need more information, Vextai declared. I'm authorizing the release of special intelligence assets. Every spy, every surveillance device, every monitoring station we possess will be focused on penetrating human space and determining their true capabilities. High Admiral Crestal of the Crimson Dynasty, whose 6 arms were equipped with advanced tactical processing nodes, began interfacing directly with the chamber's computer systems. I'm uploading our latest analysis of the human attack patterns. The precision suggests computer-guided weapons with reaction times measured in nanoseconds. Either they possess artificial intelligences far beyond our own, or what? Demanded Marshal Karath. Or their biological reaction times are naturally faster than anything we've encountered. The coordination required for those simultaneous attacks would strain our most advanced command networks. But the humans accomplished it flawlessly. Ancient Prime Thexandra blazed with light again, her thoughts flooding the chamber with terrifying possibilities. Asterisk, what if they are not using artificial intelligence at all? What if their biological capabilities exceed our understanding of what organic life can achieve? Asterisk, the suggestion was almost too disturbing to contemplate. The galactic community had long assumed that organic intelligence was inherently limited, that true strategic capability required the assistance of artificial minds operating at superhuman speeds. The idea that humans might possess natural cognitive abilities that exceeded the best of their technology challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of life itself. Regardless of how they accomplished it, Vextai said, struggling to maintain his authority in the face of growing panic, the fact remains that they have committed acts of unprovoked aggression against Council members. This cannot be allowed to stand. I propose immediate mobilization of the combined fleet. 1 million vessels converging on human space simultaneously. And if they destroy that force as easily as they destroyed our advanced fleets, asked Counselor Zethmira, we would be defenseless, our homeworlds exposed to retaliation. Then, what do you propose? Vextai snarled. That we surrender to a species we were mocking 3 days ago. Before anyone could answer, the chamber's emergency alert system activated with a sound like dying stars. The holographic display shifted to show incoming transmissions from across the galaxy, each one carrying reports that made the assembled leaders' blood run cold. Priority alert from the Hegemony Second Capital, announced the chamber's AI. Thexmiron orbital shipyards have suffered catastrophic explosions. Preliminary reports indicate complete destruction of all construction facilities. More alerts followed in rapid succession. The Thraxian Empire's primary military academy had been reduced to molten slag. The Nexary Collective's main research facility had simply vanished, leaving behind only empty space where a massive installation had stood moments before. The Crimson Dynasty's Fortress Moon had been cracked in half, like an egg. Each attack had lasted less than a minute. No attacking forces had been detected. No warnings had been given. Marshal Karath stared at the reports in growing horror. They're striking at military targets throughout the galaxy. Simultaneously. How is this possible? Lord Admiral Esikathara's multidimensional form flickered with colors indicating severe distress. The distances involved. Even with FTL communication, coordinating attacks across such vast spaces should be impossible. Unless, said Ethereal Elwyxandra quietly, they have forces positioned throughout the galaxy that we've never detected. The implications hit the assembled leaders like a physical blow. If humanity possessed fleets capable of striking anywhere in the galaxy without warning, then no system was safe. Every homeworld, every military installation, every government center could be destroyed at any moment without the slightest indication of where the attack might come from. They were no longer dealing with a regional threat that could be contained through military action. They were facing an enemy that had already surrounded them, penetrated their defenses, and demonstrated the ability to strike at the heart of their civilization whenever they chose. "We need to contact them," Supreme Chancellor Vextai said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Immediately, before this escalates beyond any possibility of control." "Contact them how?" asked General Supreme Korthval. "We severed diplomatic relations. We declared them enemies of the Council. We positioned fleets around their space with the explicit intention of intimidating them into submission. Then, we unsever relations," Vextai replied desperately. "We offer negotiations. We agree to whatever terms they demand." High Admiral Krestal's tactical processing nodes were working at maximum capacity, analyzing the incoming reports with mechanical precision. Based on current attack patterns, the humans are demonstrating restraint. They're targeting military installations and avoiding civilian populations. This suggests they may be open to negotiated settlement. Or, added Marshal Karath grimly, it suggests they're saving the civilian targets for later phases of their campaign. Ancient Prime Thexandra suddenly blazed with the brightest light yet, her thoughts projecting with such force that several council members staggered under the mental impact. Asterisk incoming transmission. Source, human space. Classification, diplomatic priority. Asterisk the chamber's communication systems activated automatically, revealing a holographic image of a woman in a crisp military uniform. She appeared to be standing on the bridge of a starship, with crew members visible in the background operating stations that looked far more advanced than anything in the Council's databases. "I am Admiral Sarah Reyes, Supreme Commander of Human Defense Forces," the woman said, her voice carrying absolute authority. "I am transmitting this message to inform the Galactic Council that humanity has received your declaration of hostilities and has responded appropriately." Vextai leaned forward desperately. "Admiral Reyes, this is Supreme Chancellor Vextai. We urgently request immediate negotiations to resolve this misunderstanding." "There is no misunderstanding," Reyes interrupted coldly. "The Council positioned military forces around human space with obvious hostile intent. You threatened our sovereignty and the safety of our citizens. We have responded with proportional force against legitimate military targets." "Proportional?" Marshal Karath roared. "You destroyed 7 entire fleets." Reyes' expression remained completely neutral. "Marshal, if our response had been disproportional, this conversation would be taking place on the ruins of your homeworlds rather than in your supposedly secure command bunker." The casual mention of their location sent chills through every member of the inner circle. The humans knew exactly where they were, even in the deepest, most protected chamber in Council space. "What do you want?" Vextai asked, his voice hollow with defeat. "Simple," Reyes replied. "Complete withdrawal of all Council military forces to positions at least 50 light-years from any human-controlled system. Formal recognition of human territorial sovereignty. And a public apology for the unprovoked aggression that forced this response." "And if we refuse?" asked Councillor Zethmira. Reyes smiled. But the expression held no warmth whatsoever. Counselor, you've seen what happens when you position military forces near our space. I trust you can imagine what happens if you actually attack our civilian populations. You're threatening genocide, whispered Lord Admiral Esekithara. I'm stating facts, Reyes corrected. Humanity has no desire to exterminate other species. But we will defend our freedom and our people against any threat, using whatever force proves necessary. The choice of escalation level is entirely yours. She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. You have 72 hours to comply with our terms. After that, we will assume that the Council has chosen military confrontation over peaceful coexistence. The transmission ended, leaving the inner circle staring at an empty holographic display. In the silence that followed, the weight of their situation became clear. They had picked a fight with a species capable of destroying their entire civilization, and their only options were surrender or extinction. Supreme Chancellor Vextai slumped in his chair, suddenly, looking far older than his centuries. Begin immediate withdrawal of all military forces. Send word to every council member. We will comply with human demands. What about our pride? Marshal Karath asked bitterly. What about our honor? Our pride, Vextai replied, is worth considerably less than the continued existence of our species. As the orders went out across the galaxy, the most powerful beings in known space confronted the reality that their age of dominance was over. Humanity had emerged from the darkness between the stars, revealed capabilities that defied understanding, and demonstrated the will to use them against anyone who threatened their freedom. The galaxy would never be the same. In the depths of space, invisible to all forms of detection, the ships of the Human Defense Force maintained their vigil. They had delivered their message clearly and efficiently. Now they would wait to see if the lesson had been learned. The choice between peace and annihilation belonged to their former enemies. For humanity's sake, they hoped wisdom would prevail over pride. But they were prepared for either outcome. 6 months after the 72-hour ultimatum, Ambassador Sarah Chun walked through the newly constructed diplomatic quarter of New Geneva Station, humanity's first major installation in neutral space. The massive orbital platform hung in the void between human and council territories, serving as a symbol of the new reality that had emerged from the ashes of galactic arrogance. The station's design reflected humanity's approach to their newfound position as the galaxy's dominant power, functional, efficient, and utterly without unnecessary display. Where alien architecture tended toward intimidation through scale or beauty through artistry, human engineering focused on practical effectiveness. Every corridor served multiple purposes. Every room could be reconfigured for different functions, and every system had redundant backups designed by a species that had learned to prepare for the worst. Chin paused at an observation window, looking out at the small fleet of vessels that had brought today's delegation of petitioners. Representatives from 17 species had requested audiences, each one seeking to establish formal diplomatic relations with humanity on terms far more favorable than what they had initially offered the Council. The irony was not lost on her. 6 months ago, these same species had been laughing at humanity's apparent weakness. Now they waited patiently for the privilege of negotiating with the successors to the galactic order they had inadvertently destroyed. Ambassador, called Captain Martinez from behind her, the Council delegation has arrived. Chancellor Vextai is requesting immediate audience. Chun turned from the window, her expression carefully neutral. Show them to Conference Room 3. Standard diplomatic protocols. And Captain, make sure our security detail understands that this meeting is being conducted under human territorial law. Martinez nodded and departed to make the arrangements. Shin took a moment to review her notes on the tablet she carried, though she hardly needed to refresh her memory of the situation. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of diplomatic activity as humanity worked to establish their new role in galactic affairs. The Council's compliance with human demands had been swift and complete. All military forces had withdrawn to the specified distances, formal apologies had been issued, and territorial sovereignty had been recognized. But the deeper implications of humanity's demonstration had sent shockwaves throughout galactic civilization that were still reverberating. Trade routes had been disrupted as species reassessed the strategic balance of power. Military alliances had crumbled as members realized their mutual defense treaties were worthless against an enemy that could strike anywhere without warning. Governments had fallen as populations demanded to know how their leaders had so catastrophically miscalculated the nature of the human threat. More importantly, other species had begun to emerge from the shadows with their own revelations. The Whispering Clans, thought to be extinct for millennia, had revealed themselves as having survived in the dark spaces between galaxies. The Crystal Collective had admitted that their apparent technological stagnation masked scientific capabilities that rivaled humanity's own. Ancient powers that had hidden themselves from galactic civilization for eons were stirring, drawn by humanity's example of concealed strength revealing itself. The galaxy was discovering that it contained far more players than anyone had suspected, and that the Council's dominance had been built on ignorance rather than genuine superiority. Chen entered Conference Room 3 to find Chancellor Vextai waiting with a small entourage of advisors. The reptilian leader looked haggard, his scales having lost much of their former luster. The stress of the past 6 months had clearly taken its toll on a being who had once commanded the respect and fear of 1,000 worlds. Ambassador Chen, Vextai said, rising from his chair with obvious effort. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. Chen took her seat across from the delegation, noting the careful body language of beings who were no longer certain of their position in any negotiation. Chancellor, how may humanity assist the Council today? The formal politeness of the question carried an undertone that both parties understood perfectly. The Council was no longer making demands or issuing ultimatums. They were here as supplicants, hoping for favorable treatment from a power they had discovered too late to truly understand. As you know, Vextai began carefully. The recent adjustments to galactic power structures have created certain instabilities. Several member species are questioning the Council's continued relevance in light of humanity's demonstrated capabilities. Chen nodded politely. Political transitions are always challenging. How does this concern human interests? The Corvin Collective has withdrawn from Council membership entirely. Vextai continued, his voice growing more strained. The Starweaver Consortium is demanding complete restructuring of Council authority. 3 minor species have declared independence and are requesting direct alliance with humanity rather than Council mediation. This was the heart of the matter. The Council's authority had been built on the assumption that its members represented the strongest powers in the galaxy. Humanity's demonstration had shattered that assumption, revealing the Council as a collection of aging powers whose dominance was more perception than reality. And you're concerned that humanity would assume primary authority over military and security matters, while the Council would maintain administrative control over trade, exploration, and internal affairs. Chen studied the proposal with growing interest. It was actually well thought out, recognizing humanity's military supremacy while preserving face for the existing power structure. The Council would continue to exist, but as junior partners in an arrangement dominated by human strategic interests. The practical advantages are obvious, Vextai continued. Humanity gains formal authority over galactic security without having to assume the burden of day-to-day administration. The Council maintains some relevance while avoiding the chaos that would result from complete dissolution. And what prevents this arrangement from devolving into the same arrogance and complacency that led to our current situation? Chen asked pointedly. Vextai's advisors shifted uncomfortably, but the Chancellor himself met her gaze directly. Because we have learned the cost of underestimating beings we consider inferior. Because we have seen what happens when pride overrides wisdom. Because we understand now that our survival depends on human restraint rather than our own strength. It was perhaps the most honest statement any Council leader had made since the crisis began. Chen appreciated the acknowledgement, even as she recognized the pragmatic calculation behind it. I'll need to consult with my superiors, Chen said. But I will say that humanity has no desire to micromanage galactic civilization. We're interested in security, not administration. If the Council can provide effective governance while respecting human sovereignty, we might be able to work together. Relief flooded Vextai's features. There is one other matter, Ambassador. Several species have requested direct bilateral relations with humanity, bypassing Council mediation entirely. The Nexary Collective is offering exclusive trade agreements. The architects want to discuss technological exchange. The Starweavers are proposing cultural and scientific cooperation. Chen nodded. This too had been expected. Humanity's demonstration had created opportunities for species that had been marginalized by Council dominance. The wise approach would be to build relationships with potential allies while maintaining enough central coordination to prevent chaos. Humanity is open to bilateral relationships, Chen replied. However, we prefer arrangements that complement rather than replace existing structures. Stability serves everyone's interests. The meeting continued for another hour, working through the details of what would eventually become known as the New Galactic Compact. It was a fascinating document, formally recognizing humanity as the primary military power while preserving face for existing governments. Trade remained under Council oversight, but strategic security was placed under human authority. Disputes would be mediated through joint commissions, with humanity holding veto power over any decision that might affect galactic stability. Most importantly, the compact established principles that would prevent future miscalculations. Military intelligence would be shared freely among all members. No species could maintain hidden fleets without disclosure to the Security Council. Any attempt to develop weapons capable of planetary destruction would be subject to joint oversight. It was an arrangement that acknowledged the new reality while providing structure for peaceful coexistence. As the Council delegation prepared to leave, Vextai paused at the conference room door. "Ambassador, may I ask a personal question?" "Of course. When you sat in that council chamber 6 months ago, listening to us mock your species, did you know this is how it would end?" Chen considered the question carefully. "Chancellor, I knew that humanity had capabilities your people hadn't seen. I knew that treating us as primitives was unwise. But honestly, I hoped it wouldn't come to military action. I hoped that wisdom would prevail over arrogance." Vextai's reptilian features twisted into what might have been a smile. "And when wisdom failed, then we did what we had to do to protect our people and our freedom," Chen replied simply, "just as any species would." After the delegation departed, Chen returned to the observation window, looking out at the stars that now held a very different meaning than they had 6 months ago. Humanity had emerged from the shadows to claim their place in galactic civilization, but the real work was just beginning. Building a stable galactic order would require more than military superiority. It would demand diplomatic skill, economic wisdom, and the kind of long-term thinking that her species had learned during their millennia of warfare on Earth. They would need to be strong enough to deter aggression while being wise enough to encourage cooperation. Most importantly, they would need to remember the lessons of humility that had led them to conceal their strength in the first place. Power without wisdom was the path to becoming the kind of arrogant overlords they had just replaced. "Captain Martinez," Chen called as her aide approached with the day's schedule. "Yes, Ambassador? Send a message to Earth. Tell them the Council has accepted our terms for the compact. The galaxy is ready to move forward." She paused, watching as ships from a dozen species maneuvered through the space around New Geneva Station. Former enemies now seeking partnership, ancient powers emerging from hiding, young civilizations looking for guidance in a rapidly changing universe. "And Captain, include a personal note. Tell them that we've proven humans can win a war in a day. Now we need to prove we can build a peace that lasts 1,000 years." As the message sped toward Earth at faster-than-light velocity, carrying news of humanity's transition from galactic newcomers to galactic guardians, the stars continued their eternal dance. But now they danced to a different rhythm, one set not by ancient arrogance, but by the measured wisdom of a species that had learned to hide their strength until strength was required. The galaxy had laughed at Earth in the council chambers. But Earth would have the last laugh after all, the quiet satisfaction of those who had turned mockery into respect, weakness into strength, and isolation into leadership. The age of human dominance had begun not with conquest, but with the patient application of overwhelming force in service of lasting peace. It was, perhaps, the most human victory of all,